Let me let you into a little secret. I haven't always had a nice record player and tape decks to play my music on. And that's what I'm going to talk about on this video. I'm going to tell you about 10 of the things I've played music on and that I've loved over the years. After all, I doubt any of us started off with top of the range equipment. And when youngsters start getting involved in building their own music collections, it's when I find it a bit catty to call them out because they don't have the best decks. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is the first, my dad's Grundig reel-to-reel tape recorder. This is where it all started for me. When I was born, my parents had an amusement arcade. And in that arcade, they'd play tapes of all the hits of the time. I'm talking about the late 50s, early 60s. I have 4 tapes from that time that I've kept over the years, and they're precious to me. It was on one of those tapes that at about 18 months old, I found out how to control it. My elder sister tells me that I loved Charlie Drake's Splish Splash and found out how to operate the tape recorder and could rewind it to where the song started. Apparently, they were shocked that I could do this. So am I at that age. Here's number 2. We had a family record player like this, and it was shared between my elder sister and my brother. They'd have their own records, and from time to time, I was bought records. The first one, which was I Want to Hold Your Hand, I was 3 years old, and then I was allowed to use it. In photo 3, it's my 7th birthday, and as you can see, I've now got my own record player. It was cheap and plastic and mine. The year before, I'd bought the Beatles' Revolver album, just after my 6th birthday, and Eddie Floyd's Knock on Wood later in the year. And my fledgling record collection was played on this record player. Here's number 4. It's the summer of 1968, and I walked into our arcade and my dad calls me over. "Look at this," he says. "It's like a tape recorder, but the tape's in a case." "What happens when the tape runs out?" I said. He said it just comes to a stop and you turn it over and play the other side. Dad's friend had brought it in to show him. To this day I can remember the tape that was in it. It was Esther and Obi Afarim's Cinderella Rockefeller album. Dad bought the same model as this one a few weeks later. Number 5, I was 13 in 1973 when I got this gorgeous dance set for Christmas. It came with Slade's Merry Christmas Everybody on the deck. This record player was my go-to for the next 5 years. Some of my all-time favourite records got their first play on this record player in glorious mono. Now before we carry on, why don't you let me know some of the things you've played your records and tapes on over the year? Make a comment down there. If you're enjoying the video so far, I would love it if you could hit that like button and feel free to share it amongst all your friends. Let's get back to it. It's number 6. In the summer of 1975, Dad came home with this Ferrograph tape recorder. He'd bought it second-hand from the BBC local radio station in Bristol, and I couldn't believe he'd spent £100 on it with a big external speaker. It was on this tape recorder that I started to build my collection of reel-to-reel tapes. Here's number 7. It's 1976 and this is my first stereo music centre. The lid came off in 2 parts and became stereo speakers. It had a built-in cassette recorder, and it was from here that I started making my own tape compilations. Years later, these would be called mixtapes. Disco was starting to become the rage, and I was buying all those new 12-inch singles on that new format. They sounded great. Sadly though, there wasn't a lot of bass in those speakers. Here's number 8. It's 1978 and I bought this little cassette deck because it was small enough to me to take on the bus with me where I could play my own tape compilations everywhere I went. When I passed my driving test in 1979 and got my first car, it didn't have a cassette player in it, just a radio. This cassette fitted in the glove compartment. So I run a speaker wire under the carpets all around the back up to the back window shelf and fitted a little speaker there. I was still listening to music in glorious mono and spending a fortune on batteries to keep it going. Number 9, it's 1984, I'm married, and this was our proper first decent music centre. It sounded fantastic. It cost a fortune, I paid for it over 18 months and I loved it. I ended up buying a separate record deck to go with it too, and I was in heaven. You could hear all the boom 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 and the tss tss tss. And as the speakers could be lifted off that centre console, it was lovely sounding when you had speakers far away. Even now, it's my favourite of everything I've ever bought to play my music on. I was in my 20s and it sounded cool and groovy. Now before I tell you my last one, if you're new to the channel and this kind of stuff floats your boat, give that subscribe button the old ring-a-ding-ding, and those clever people at YouTube will let you know when I post a video. So finally, it's number 10. And I couldn't talk about my music players without talking about this Cytronic Disco deck console. It lived in the paybox of my fairground ride from Easter until November, and for the rest of the year it lived in my paint shed, where my records would accompany me as I painted my equipment for the following year. As I look back, I've had some really rubbish music systems and some okay ones, but do you know what? They all sounded great to me at the time, and I couldn't have loved the music that I played on them any more than I did if I'd have had top of the range equipment. Now, if you'd like to click up there, you can join me as I remember mixtapes and their modern counterparts.